It was one of those first cold snaps of the season, the kind that makes you feel like you're suddenly in a different world. The days were getting shorter, and everything seemed wrapped in this heavy, damp fog. It was a strange feeling, like time was slowing down, but it wasn't a comfortable, cozy slow. More like a quiet, distant kind of loneliness that just kind of clings to you. I hadn't been back to my old neighborhood in years, not since Mom passed, and not since Dad packed up and moved to the desert. The house sold, the town faded into the background, and before I knew it, everything felt like a distant memory. The kind you don't really want to remember, but you can't quite forget either. The decision to go back wasn't something I planned. It just kind of happened one night when I was working one of those endless shifts that mess with your head. You know, the ones where time just melts away, and you're left wondering if it's Tuesday or Sunday, or if it even matters anymore. My mind kept wandering back to the old place. So one evening in the middle of that strange kind of restlessness, I found myself booking a ticket. No real plans, no expectations. I just needed to see it again to remember what it felt like before everything got messy. My aunt was the last family I had left, and she didn't hesitate to offer me a place to stay. She lived in a little cottage on the edge of town. Kind of place that looked like it belonged in a holiday catalog. Too many Christmas lights on the porch, the kind that blinked in all the wrong places. The scent of peppermint candles always wafting through the air, almost like she was trying to cover up the musty smell of an old house that had seen better days. It felt a little like a stage set for a holiday movie, too perfect, too forced. I stayed in the guest room, which felt too small and too big at the same time. The walls smelled like pine mixed with dust, and whole place was a strange mix of cozy and stifling. My aunt chattered on about neighbors I didn't even recognize, pulling out old photos and telling stories I didn't remember being part of. It was like replaying a movie where I wasn't even the main character, just some ghost floating through the background. By the third day, I had to get out. The town felt like it was closing in on me, and I needed a break. My aunt lent me her Subaru, this beat-up car that looked like it should have been retired 10 years ago, and I told her I was just going to drive around for a bit. I didn't tell her exactly where I was headed, but I knew what I needed. I needed to see the lake. Not just any lake though, this was our lake. The one Dad used to take us to every summer, the one tucked away in the woods like a secret no one else knew about. I used to think of it as a peaceful, quiet place where everything felt simpler, where you could just sit by the water and breathe. And for a little while, the world made sense. But it had been years, and I'd forgotten so much the sound of the wind through the trees, the way the water rippled when it touched the shore, how it felt to stand there and just be. I needed to remind myself. The drive was quiet, just the hum of the engine and the occasional creak of the old car as it took each turn. The road narrowed as I got closer, winding through the trees. The fog had thickened, like the world was wrapped in a blanket of gray that you couldn't quite shake off. It wasn't exactly cold, more like that in-between weather where you can't tell if it's about to warm up or freeze. When I finally reached the lake, it felt like I had stepped into a different world. The parking lot was empty except for a couple of cars, but the air was thick with silence, like everything was holding its breath. In the corner, there was an old silver SUV parked with its engine running, windows all fogged up. I parked next to it, locked my car and stepped out, instantly feeling the weight of the quiet. The path down to the water was the same, but somehow it felt off. The trees, the air, everything about the place felt frozen in time. The footsteps I made on the dirt path were muffled, like the forest was swallowing the sound, as if it didn't want to let me in. I kept walking, my heart starting to race, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was something about the place, something in the air that made me feel like I wasn't supposed to be there. And then I saw at the lake, just like I remembered, maybe even more so. The water was frozen over, a light dusting of snow covering the trees, the twin pines standing proud by the shore, their branches weighed down by ice. For a moment, everything felt calm again, like I could breathe, like the world outside could just fade away. But that feeling, the one I couldn't quite shake, crept back in. It wasn't the silence this time. It was something else, something about the way the place held itself together, like it was waiting for something to happen. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just my nerves, the fact that I hadn't been here in so long. But then I heard it scraping distant sharp, like something dragging across the ice. I whipped around, but there was nothing there, just the trees and the lake, and the faintest whisper of wind. I ignored it at first, trying to focus on the beauty of the place. The storm was starting to roll in now, the wind picking up, and I could see a few people walking the trail on the far side of the lake. They were moving fast, voices raised over the increasing wind. Blizzard coming in fast. One of them called out, "We need to get back." I turned toward the parking lot, suddenly feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. I didn't know what it was, but something about the storm didn't sit right. The wind was picking up, the air was getting colder, and the snow was beginning to stick to the ground. When I reached the parking lot, everything had changed. The snow was falling so hard now that the world around me was fading into a blur. The CV was still there, the engine running. The windows were fogged up, and I could hear that scraping again, closer this time. My feet felt like they were stuck in the snow, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from that SUV. I don't know why, but I felt this pull, like I needed to know who was inside or if anyone was inside. I started walking toward it, but the scraping sound grew louder, faster, more frantic. It wasn't coming from inside the SUV, it was coming from behind it. My heart stopped, and I turned, but there was nothing. Except the scraping continued closer now, as if something or someone was dragging itself along the ice behind me. I don't know what it was, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't supposed to be there anymore. I didn't look back. I ran to my car, slammed the door and gunned the engine. As I sped out of the parking lot, I caught a glimpse of something moving in my rearview mirror. But when I looked, there was nothing, just the storm, the snow and the fading sense of something I couldn't explain. By the time I made it back to my aunt's place, the snow was coming down harder than ever. I was frozen to the bone, but it wasn't the cold that made me shake. I couldn't explain why, but I felt like something was off. My aunt was sitting by the window when I walked in, as if she had been waiting for me. She smiled, all warm and casual, like nothing was unusual. "You're back already? The snow's really coming down out there." I nodded, trying to mask the unease that had settled in my chest. "Yeah, big storm." They weren't kidding. She looked at me for a long moment, and then in that way of hers that always felt too knowing, she asked, "Did you see the black eyes?" I froze. I don't know what I expected her to say, but it definitely wasn't that. She smiled again, that strange knowing smile, and didn't say another word. I never went back. It's funny how you can spend months, even years, in the same place and not notice the way things start to change when the world goes quiet. I remember when I first started working the night shift at the gas station. It was just a job. I needed the hours, and the place was always empty enough that I could get some peace. All I had to do was stock shelves, clean up a bit, and wait for the occasional car to roll through. Easy stuff. At first, I thought it was kind of nice. The nights were slow, the air a little stale, but it was peaceful. There was something almost hypnotic about it. The hum of the lights overhead, the soft buzz of the freezer in the back, and the rare sounds of a car engine pulling up, maybe a late-night driver grabbing some gas or a snack. You start to get used to the routine. Sometimes it felt like the world outside didn't exist at all. It was like I could just drift into a kind of trance. But after a couple of months, I began to notice things. Little things at first. Things that didn't seem like a big deal, but looking back really should have set off alarms. It started with footsteps. At first I thought it was just the building settling. Old places make weird sounds, right? But the more it happened, the more I couldn't shake the feeling something wasn't quite right. I'd be behind the counter, maybe restocking candy bars or arranging chips, and then I'd hear it like someone walking on the linoleum just outside the door. I'd rush over to the window, expecting to see a car pull in or someone standing out there. Every time the parking lot was empty, no one was there. Then there was the feeling. You know that feeling like someone's watching you? It wasn't constant, but there were nights when I'd catch myself looking over my shoulder for no reason at all, like I wasn't alone in the room. The worst part was the cold feeling that would creep up the back of my neck. That sensation like someone was standing right behind me. I'd spin around, of course, but nothing. Every time. It got worse the longer I worked those shifts. At first, I just brushed it off. But the quiet, the isolation, it started to get oppressive. And the whispers, yeah, the whispers. I started hearing them, faint at first. It almost sounded like voices, muffled by the walls, like someone was talking just on the other side of the drywall. I figured it was the air ducts or the pipes. I mean, the building was old. But then sometimes I'd swear I'd hear my name, softly, almost like a breath in the wind. Lily. I'd freeze my heart pounding and look around. Of course no one was there. As the weeks dragged on, it became impossible to ignore. It was like the place was getting heavier. The quietness pressed in on me. I couldn't focus on the job. I started carrying extra batteries for the flashlight, just in case. Because it wasn't just the silence anymore, it was the flickering lights too. They'd blink every once in a while, but after a while it felt different. It felt deliberate, like they were trying to signal something, trying to tell me something I didn't want to know. And then, one night, everything changed. It was around 3 a.m. I remember. I was alone as usual, just zoning out behind the counter, sipping on a half-empty soda when I heard it. A car engine, louder than normal, like it was coming straight at me. At first, I thought maybe it was someone in a rush, trying to get through before the morning traffic hit. But then, when the car stopped, the headlights stayed on. Too long. I glanced up, expecting to see someone getting out of the car. But no one did. The car sat there. An old sedan, headlights cutting through the dark like two eyes glaring at me. I couldn't see anyone inside. No movement. But there was something about the car, something off. The interior was too dark. Like the shadows inside, it swallowed the seats and the dashboard. The air felt heavier, like everything around me had stopped moving. I stepped back from the window, not sure what to think. Maybe it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks. But then I heard it. A soft scraping sound, like something dragging across the floor. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I froze. The sound was coming from inside the store. The back room. I stood there, paralyzed for a moment. I wanted to call out, yell for whoever it was to stop messing around, but I couldn't move. My eyes were locked on the hallway leading to the back office. The storage room. The lights were flickering now, casting long, jagged shadows. The hallway was dark, too dark. I didn't want to go down there, but something inside me told me I had to. I grabbed the flashlight from under the counter and started walking toward the back. My heart was pounding in my chest. I thought I saw something, maybe a figure in the shadows, but I couldn't be sure. The sound was getting louder. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I rounded the corner, shining the flashlight down the back room. The shelves were lined with boxes and cans, just like I'd left them. But then I saw it. The basement door slightly ajar. And the handle? It was turning slowly, like someone was trying to open it from the other side. My stomach dropped. I didn't have the guts to check, but I couldn't just leave it. I had to know what was going on. I took a few cautious steps forward, hoping to get a better look, but as I got closer, the light flickered. Once, twice, then out. Everything went silent. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe it was just a power surge. But as I fumbled with the flashlight, trying to get it back on, I felt it. The air had changed. It wasn't just empty anymore. I wasn't alone. Then I heard it again. The scraping. But now it was louder, sharper. And it was closer. Scratch, 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 scratch. My hands were shaking as I clicked the flashlight back on. I pointed it toward the basement door. And for a second, just a second, I saw it. A face. Pale. Gaunt. Its eyes hollow. Staring up at me from beneath the door. I didn't even think. I just ran. I bolted for the front of the store, grabbing my jacket and keys as I passed. I didn't look back, but the sound scratch, scratch, scratch followed me slow and deliberate all the way to the exit. The door slammed shut behind me, and I stumbled into the parking lot, gasping for breath. But even there out in the open, I could still hear it. The scraping coming from inside the walls, from the pipes, from the floorboards. I never went back. I couldn't, but sometimes when I'm driving down that stretch of road late at night, I can see the faint glow of the gas station lights in the distance. And I can't help but feel like something's still waiting inside, waiting for the next person who's desperate enough to take the night shift. Because once you walk in there, you don't leave that. You know, I never wanted to work the night shift. I mean, who does, right? But it was the only shift left when I started as a respiratory therapist at St. Helens Medical Center. And let's be honest, beggars can't be choosers. The hospital was fine during the day. Busy, chaotic, full of life. But at night, that's when things changed. It felt like the building exhaled a sigh of relief as the last nurse and doctor headed out, leaving just the skeleton crew and me alone. Honestly, there was just something about the stillness that felt off. The quiet. It wasn't just the usual emptiness of a hospital at night, though that was unsettling enough. It was like the whole place had a pulse of its own, one that slowed down when the sun went down and seemed to go a little wrong. Maybe I was just imagining it, or maybe it was the lack of sleep getting to me. But still I could feel it. Something was wrong. At first, the work wasn't so bad. I checked the ventilators, adjust the oxygen levels, keep an eye on the patients. The usual. I was still getting the hang of things, and it was mostly routine. But the thing about working in the ICU is that you're around people who are barely hanging on, people who might not make it through the night. and you start to wonder what happens after they go. Take Mrs. Arnold, for example. She was this frail, elderly woman who'd been battling cancer for a while. By the time I started working with her, she was unconscious and hooked up to every machine imaginable. Her family had already said their goodbyes, and I was just supposed to make her comfortable until the inevitable happened. That was my job. Check the equipment, make sure she wasn't in pain, keep things running smoothly until she finally passed. But here's the thing. Every time I checked her vitals, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It wasn't just that eerie quiet or the flickering lights overhead. It was something else, like a presence hovering in the corners of the room. The first time I noticed it, I thought it was just me being tired. Maybe I was imagining it. But then it happened again and again. I could have sworn I heard whispers. Quiet, soft, almost like a voice calling my name. But when I turned around, nothing. Empty room. Just the machines beeping away and the dull hum of the overhead lights. I figured it was just the exhaustion messing with me. I was working nights after all, but the whispers came back. Night after night, same soft voice. I didn't know what to make of it. Was I hearing things, or was someone really trying to get my attention? It wasn't just the whispers. I started noticing strange things with the patients too. I checked their vitals, and sometimes the numbers would dip just a little. Nothing major, but enough for me to notice. I kept adjusting the machines, but it always felt like something was pushing back. It's hard to explain, but I started to get this gut feeling that maybe the equipment wasn't the problem. Maybe something or someone was interfering. I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe I was just still too new to the job. Maybe I didn't understand everything about how the machines worked. Or maybe, I wondered, was someone messing with the patients? Maybe someone else was tampering with the equipment. Hospitals are full of vulnerable people, and not everyone is as kind as they should be. But I couldn't put my finger on it. Who would do that? And why? The whole thing started to feel off. But I was just a rookie. I kept doing my job, keeping my head down. And then things took a turn. It was on cold Wednesday night, about a week after Mrs. Arnold had been admitted, that I first heard it. Footsteps. It wasn't the usual creak of the old building settling. It wasn't the hum of the machines or the distant shuffle of night staff in the halls. No, this was something else. Someone was walking behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Just the empty hallway bathed in the harsh light of the fluorescent bulbs above. I told myself it was nothing. I was just tired. But the next night, the same thing happened. And the night after that, every time I turn a corner, I'd hear footsteps. But when I looked, the hallway would be empty. It wasn't just paranoia. Something was following me. I tried talking to the other staff about it, but they brushed me off. The building's old, they said. You're probably just hearing things. Yeah, I'd heard that excuse before. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. Something was off. Then the night that changed everything. It was another quiet shift. Mrs. Arnold was still with us, clinging to life, but that night things took a turn. I had just finished adjusting her oxygen levels when I noticed something strange with the readings. The numbers on the ventilator weren't quite right. They were fluctuating slightly, but enough to catch my eye. I checked the settings, readjusted the equipment, but the numbers kept jumping as if something else was controlling them. That's when I heard it, a whisper. But this time it was clear. Help me. I froze. It wasn't my imagination, it was real. I could feel it too. The air in the room seemed to thicken, like something was pressing in around me. I slowly turned toward the source of the sound, and there by the far window was a figure, a woman. Pale, thin, her eyes hollow and glowing faintly in the dark. She was staring at me, her mouth moving, though no sound came out. Help me, she whispered again. And this time I knew it was Mrs. Arnold. But there was something wrong, something off about her. And that's when I saw them. Figures. Standing in the shadows. More of them. All of them watching. Silent still. I couldn't count how many there were. But they were all there. Waiting. For what? I didn't want to know. The room felt smaller. The walls seemed like they were closing in on me. The air was so thick I could barely breathe. I could hear the whispers, now louder, growing more desperate. Help us. I turned to leave to get out of that room, but the door wouldn't open. The handle was stuck, frozen in place. My heart was racing, my hands slick with sweat. I yanked at the door. Nothing. Then I heard it, a low guttural sound behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know what it was, but I did anyway. Mrs. Arnold, or whatever she had become, was standing at the foot of the bed. Her mouth was wide open, like she was trying to scream, but no sound came out. She just kept whispering. Over and over that same desperate plea, help us. My body went into panic mode. I stumbled back and finally the door gave. I ran, no looking back. My heart felt like it was about to explode in my chest as I ran down the hall, those footsteps behind me again, echoing in the empty halls. I never went back to St. Helens after that. I couldn't. I still hear the whispers sometimes. Late at night when the house is too quiet, I'll hear that soft, desperate voice calling out to me, "Help us." And I wonder if I had stayed, if I had listened. Would I have been able to help them? Or would I have become just another figure in the shadows? For most of my life, I just felt like I was drifting. I wasn't a bad person, didn't get into any major trouble, but I wasn't exactly heading anywhere either. School was a struggle, my grades were bad, I didn't even finish college, and I barely tried to find anything that could give me direction. I was like one of those people who just hung around, kind of existing without really living. Everything I tried seemed to fizzle out before it even started. By the time I hit 26, things had really gotten bad. I couldn't find a job, not even a simple one. I would send out applications, follow up, get hopeful, and then hear nothing back. I had a few interviews here and there, but nothing stuck. I was about to throw in the towel when Janelle stepped in. She was the type of person who just got things done, and out of nowhere, she helped me land a job. It wasn't glamorous. In fact, it was pretty far from it, but it was a job. A chance. So I took it. I started working night shifts at a distribution center, which is basically a giant warehouse. We loaded pallets of boxes from 9 p.m. until 6:30 a.m. It was grueling. The company was always short-staffed, so I often found myself working alone, carrying the weight of everything. Over time, they cut our hours down to 4:30 a.m., but it didn't help much. The work was always tough, and the people fleeting. One by one, they would disappear. It wasn't ideal, but I needed to make a living. So I put my headphones in and tried to zone out. The shifts were long and lonely. I didn't talk to anyone. What was the point? The odds were high. I wouldn't see these people again anyway. And frankly, I didn't have the energy for small talk. My mind was always somewhere else on the things I was losing in my life, things I couldn't quite grasp. One night though, something happened that would make me question everything. Just before my shift ended, I noticed a guy standing by the door. He was small, kind of nondescript, and didn't look like anyone I knew. I assumed he was a new hire, maybe just there to observe. But after I finished my task and pulled my headphones off, he was still standing there. I walked over to him, half expecting him to ask something about the job. "Hey, you need help with something?" I asked, trying to be polite. He shifted on his feet, like he wasn't sure how to say whatever he was about to. After a long pause, he finally mumbled, "Can I get a ride home?" I didn't recognize him at all. He wasn't someone I'd seen around the warehouse. But there was something in his voice, something off. Still, I didn't want to be rude. "I can give you a ride, but I'll need some gas money," I said, half joking. I didn't even know why I said that. It felt awkward. He nodded quickly, almost too quickly, like he'd been waiting for me to say that. "Yeah, I've got cash." "Okay, fine." It was weird, but I wasn't about to leave him stranded, right? I told him to give me a minute to punch out and grab my stuff. Then we'd go. But when I mentioned it to one of my co-workers, they gave me a weird look. "You sure you saw someone?" "We don't have anyone new here," they said. I didn't know what to make of that. Maybe I had missed something. Maybe he was just temping or something. Either way, I didn't really feel like digging deeper. So I head outside, and to my surprise, the guy's already standing next to my car. I didn't even tell him which one was mine, but whatever. Maybe he had been paying attention when I walked out. We get in, and I start driving. I wasn't really thinking much, just trying to get home, you know. My mind was a million miles away. "Where do you live?" I asked, trying to make some small talk. He gave me a vague answer. "Maple Drive." Then, almost as if he realized he'd gotten it wrong, he corrected himself. "No, wait, near the park." "You know Rose Park? The one by the edge of the city?" I frowned. "Yeah, but we're near the park." He just shrugged, sounding distracted. "Just head towards it. I'll tell you where to go." I wasn't convinced, but whatever. I tried to press him for more details, but he wasn't giving anything else. At this point, I was just tired. I wanted to get him home and be done with it. As we got closer to the park, he told me to turn onto a narrow, unlit road. I wasn't sure about it. It didn't look like a proper road, more like a dirt trail that hadn't been used in years. But I don't know, maybe I was too tired to care, so I followed his instructions. It wasn't long before I saw what was blocking the road. A massive tree had fallen across it. "Looks like we're stuck," I said, trying to stay calm. "We'll have to turn around and go back." But he didn't respond. I glanced over at him, and that's when I noticed his hands were buried deep in his hoodie pockets. He was staring straight ahead, his expression blank, almost like he was waiting for something. Before I could say another word, he suddenly screamed, "Get out of the car." Now. I froze, my blood running cold. I didn't even have time to think. My brain just started racing. And then I saw them, two masked men, emerging from the shadows. They weren't just standing there, they were moving toward us, fast. Everything happened in a split second. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my hands were shaking. But I didn't stop to think, I just acted. As soon as the guy next to me reached for the door, I slammed my foot on the gas. I threw the car into reverse, so fast it almost jerked me out of my seat. The engine roared, and I didn't care what I hit in the process. I just had to get out of there. I didn't even look back. I didn't want to know what was happening behind me. I kept my foot on the gas, reversing until I was back on the main road. My hands were white-knuckled on the wheel, and my chest felt like it was going to explode. I didn't know what the hell had just happened. When I finally made it home, I sat in my car for a few minutes, breathing hard, trying to shake off the feeling that had settled over me like a weight. I didn't call the police. I don't know why. Maybe it was the shock. Maybe I felt like it was too unbelievable to explain. I just wanted to forget it. The next day I called my manager to tell him what happened. He was pretty concerned, and they checked the security footage. What they found made my stomach drop. The guy had been watching me for over an hour before he even approached me. He'd been standing by my car waiting. They said they contacted the police, but I was never questioned. It felt strange, like maybe they didn't believe me. Maybe they didn't care. I'll never know. After that night, I stuck it out for another month at the warehouse before I finally left. I never saw the guy again, and honestly, I didn't want to. The one good thing that came from it was that the company started locking the doors during overnight shifts, which looking back seemed like something they should have done from the start. I guess the biggest lesson I learned that night was to trust my instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. And don't ignore that feeling no matter how small it seems. I remember that night like it's burned into my memory. The kind of event that sticks with you, sharp, cold, and impossible to forget. It's like time froze, and all I could do was watch it all unravel, knowing I had no control over how it would end. At the time, I was 52, a little older than most of the guys I worked with at the tech factory, but I didn't mind. I liked the quiet, the routine. The graveyard shift gave me plenty of time to think, just me and the hum of the security monitors in that little control room. Most nights it was just me, no drama, no excitement. I knew the factory inside and out, and for once life felt stable. I had some bad years behind me, lots of bad years actually, but I was in a good place now. I had a job I could count on. Everything was smooth until that night. It was a regular January evening. Cold, sure, but that's not what stood out. What stood out was the moment I saw them on the security cameras, two figures moving in the dark parking lot. At first I didn't think much of it. Could have been a couple of drunks trying to cut through the property, but something about the way they moved caught my eye. They were weaving, stumbling, clearly off balance. Not the usual people you'd expect to see here at that time of night. I called over John and Nate, two other guards on the shift, and we made our way out to check it out. The parking lot was nearly empty. Just a few cars parked at the far end. The streetlights did their best to illuminate the space, but everything still felt shadowed, unreal. By the time we got there, the figures were clearer. Two boys. The younger one, maybe 16, looked a bit lost, his clothes all over the place. The older one, though, Kieran, had this way about him. Even from a distance, I could tell he wasn't just drunk. There was something else in the way he carried himself. "Hey, what are you doing here?" I called out, my voice loud in the quiet night. The smaller one. Luke looked like he was about to bolt. But Kieran, he just stood there, swaying a little. Like he didn't have a care in the world. "We're just looking for a shortcut." Luke mumbled, his words thick and slow. "Lost the phone, man. Sorry." I didn't buy it. Not for a second, but I've been around enough to know when someone's just messing around, and when it's more serious. I figured I'd help them out, let them get their phone, and they'd leave without much fuss. I pulled out my flashlight, aimed it at the ground, and started looking through the gravel. That's when things started to change. Kieran's posture stiffened, and I noticed his eyes flash, suddenly aware of the light on him. "Stop filming," he snapped, his voice cutting through the air. "Filming? Kid, I'm just using a flashlight." My voice came out lighter than I felt, trying to diffuse whatever was brewing. But Kieran wasn't listening. His face twisted, his eyes wild, like something was about to snap. And then I saw it. From the waistband of his pants, he pulled out a sword. Not a toy, not a prop. A real blade. I didn't have time to think. Just a second before he lunged at me, I realized what he was doing. But it was too late. His face was full of rage as he swung the sword, the blade slicing through the air in a flash. The first hit came so fast, I barely had a chance to raise my arm in defense. The pain was instant, sharp, like nothing I'd ever felt before. My right hand was gone. Just like that. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My body went into autopilot, crawling away, trying to escape the hell that had just opened up, but Kieran wasn't done. John, bless him, rushed forward, trying to pull me out of harm's way. But Kieran didn't hesitate. He swung the sword again, this time slicing through John's jacket and deep into his arm. I saw the blood, the way John staggered back, clutching his wound, but it didn't slow Kieran down. He was on me again, relentless. Then Luke joined the chaos. I didn't see it coming, but the next thing I knew he was on top of me, stabbing. Each thrust of the knife felt like it was pushing me further away from consciousness. The pain, God, it was unbearable. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I was fading fast, and then everything went dark. I don't remember much after that. Just flashes of people, of voices, of sharp lights. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, my body sore and weak. John was there too, though he barely made it. He survived, but not without scars, both physical and mental. The two boys, Kieran and Luke, they were caught, of course. It didn't take long for the police to figure out what happened. Their faces were all over the news, cold and detached as they pled guilty to everything they'd done. Kieran even tried to explain himself when they asked him why he had the sword. His excuse, it was for self-defense. But I didn't buy that. The truth was simpler. He wasn't carrying it to defend himself from anything. He carried it because he wanted to use it. I can't stop thinking about that night, about how much of it was pure chance. I could have been anywhere, doing anything else. I could have been at home, maybe even asleep. But I wasn't. I was there, in that parking lot, at the wrong time, doing a job I thought was safe. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How easily things can change. One moment, you're sitting in a security office, drinking coffee, watching the screens. The next, you're fighting for your life. How does that happen? Kieran and Luke, well, they'll carry this with them too. The rest of their lives, probably. I wonder if they ever stop to think about it, to think about the weight of what they've done. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. As for me, I still don't know how to feel about it. Some things I guess aren't meant to be understood. And now every night when I close my eyes, I can still hear their footsteps. Still see the... I used to work at this hole-in-the-wall convenience store in the quiet part of Brooklyn. It wasn't much, just a cramped little space with shelves of dusty snacks, weird trinkets, and rows of VHS tapes. Most people didn't come for the snacks. They came for the other stuff, the movies. The kind they didn't really want to be seen buying. The store had this vibe like it existed just under the radar. It wasn't flashy or inviting. It was a place you'd visit when you didn't want anyone to know you were there. I didn't expect it to be that kind of job, but the weirdness hit me from the start. There was always something off about the place. The people who came in, it was like they all had their own stories that you didn't want to know, but couldn't help but wonder about. The guy who'd come in at midnight, just to browse the adult section. The woman who tried to pay for her soda with pocket change and a handful of crumpled lottery tickets. It was like living in the middle of a movie that no one else was watching. But the strangest of all was a woman I'll call Vera. She wasn't your typical customer. In fact, she wasn't the type of person you'd expect to see out in the open, especially in a place like this. Vera was older, way past her prime, but there was still something unsettling about her. Something about the way she moved, slow, deliberate, but with a nervous edge. Her skin was way too pale, like she hadn't seen sunlight in years. Her eyes, huge, too wide, like they were about to pop out of her face. And the way she spoke, it was never really clear. She was always a little off. I never knew what was going on with her. The only thing I knew for sure was that she was a regular. Every week without fail, Vera would come in, and every time she'd ask the same question, "Which of my movies do you have?" At first, I thought maybe I'd misheard her, or maybe she just wasn't all there. But no, she asked it again and again. "Which of my movies do you have?" The first time I tried to answer, I explained that our system wasn't set up to search by actors, just by titles. But Vera didn't seem to care. She wasn't listening, at least not to the words. She just kept repeating herself louder each time. "Which one of my films? I need to know. How many copies do you have?" It was strange. She'd get agitated, her hands twitching like she wanted to rip the shells apart. But then she'd never take anything. Sometimes I'd try to point her toward the adult section where the movies were, but she'd pull back almost like she was repulsed by the very idea. It was like she couldn't reconcile being a part of that world, and yet not being a part of it all at once. It wasn't that I hated the job, but after a while I dreaded those visits. She'd come in, go through the same routine, and leave me standing there, wondering if there was more to her story than I could even guess. Was she just caught in a cycle? Was there something darker going on? I couldn't figure it out. Then one week, she didn't show up. At first I thought it was just a fluke. Maybe she was on vacation. Or maybe she just decided to take a break from whatever routine she had. But after a few days, it started to feel like a relief. I didn't have to deal with the same strange, uncomfortable interaction again. I actually began to wonder if I'd ever see her again. Maybe something had happened to her. Maybe she'd fallen off the map for good. But then a month later, she showed up again. She looked worse. Way worse. Her clothes were ragged, like she'd been living in them for days or weeks. Her hair was this greasy, knotted mess, sticking out in all directions. And that's when I saw it, a huge, ugly bruise around her eye. It was dark, swollen, and had been there for a while. But it wasn't just that. Her eyes. They were huge, but not in the same way they used to be. They were dilated, and the whites were yellow like she'd been up for days, maybe weeks. Whatever she'd been doing, it was taking a toll. She didn't waste any time. She shuffled straight up to the counter, and without even acknowledging the state she was in, asked the same damn question, "Which of my movies do you have?" I rubbed my eyes trying to process what I was seeing. "Vera, I can't look up your movies like that. I've told you before, the system only lets us search by titles, not actors." But she didn't seem to hear me. She just stood there staring past me, not really focusing on anything. Her body was still, but it felt like her mind was somewhere else, miles away. I tried to offer her the same suggestion. Maybe she should go check the shelves herself, but she barely acknowledged me. Then, just like that, she turned around and started backing up toward the door like she was caught in a trance. I thought that was it. I figured she'd just leave like usual, maybe disappear for another week or two, who knows, but no. Less than a minute later, the door opened again. This time, it wasn't Vera who walked in. It was a man. Tall, well-dressed, the kind of guy who looked like he could have stepped out of a mafia movie, sharp suit. Polished shoes, the whole package. He didn't say anything to me at first, just came right up to the counter, slammed his hands down with a soft clink of diamond-studded rings. And then he looked me straight in the eye and said, "I know what's going on here. You're the problem, and I'm here to fix it." I didn't know what the hell was going on. I didn't know who this guy was, but I knew one thing for sure. This was not someone I wanted to cross. He had that presence calm, controlled, like he had the world in his hands and expected everyone around him to play by his rules. He looked over at Vera, who was still standing by the door, dazed. "Give me a list of her movies," he demanded. "I know who she is. I know what she's been in." That's when I realized he wasn't just some random customer. This guy knew Vera. He knew her real name and her stage name both. I hadn't put it together before, but now it hit me he was someone who had done his homework. He wasn't a fan. He was involved in her life, in some way that I didn't fully understand, but didn't want to. I tried to tell him that I couldn't look up specific actors in the system, but he wasn't having any of it. He just stared me down. "Do it," he said. "Now." Something about the way he looked at me made me move. Slowly, I sat down at the computer, hands shaking, and started pulling up the list. It felt like I was caught in a bad dream. The whole time, he stood there, cracking his knuckles, eyes never leaving me, like I was his next target. As I went through the list, I couldn't help but notice how many films Vera had been in. It was endless. Big titles, small ones. Some I recognized, some I didn't. She had been a major player in this world for years. And it hit me that she was probably still getting royalties for a lot of this stuff. When I finally finished pulling the tapes and was about to ring them up, the man stopped me again. He pulled out a pistol from his jacket and set it down on the counter like it was no big deal. "Are we good?" he asked, his voice as calm as if we were discussing the weather. My heart skipped a beat, but I nodded. "Yeah," I whispered, trying to keep my hands from shaking as I scanned the tapes. They left, and I don't think either of them said another word. But the whole thing felt wrong, like I had just been part of something I didn't fully understand. I called my boss to report the robbery, and guess what? I got fired on the spot. To this day, I don't know who that man was or what he really wanted with those tapes. But I can't shake the feeling that Vera was caught in something much darker than I ever imagined. And I wonder if she ever really got the help she needed, or if she even had a chance to get out of it. Looking back, it still feels surreal. I always thought scary stories were supposed to be full of monsters or ghostly hauntings, but what happened to me wasn't anything like that. There was no blood, no creepy noises in the dark, no eerie figures standing in corners. What happened to me was something much worse, a feeling of being trapped, completely helpless, surrounded by strange, unfamiliar faces, and stuck in a situation I couldn't control. Even now, when I think about it, it feels almost absurd. But trust me, at the time, it was the scariest thing I've ever experienced. Let me set the scene for you. It was a few years ago when I was living in South Korea. My Korean was, let's say, non-existent, and I had just moved in with my girlfriend, who was from there. I figured I could just wing it, that somehow everything would work itself out. Well, spoiler alert, it didn't. Without a job, I was sinking fast. The idea of being stuck in a foreign country with no income, no language skills, and no real plan started to feel like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Then a friend of a friend offered me a job at a theme park. It was one of those cheap knockoff places. You know, the ones where you can tell they tried to copy Disneyland, but ended up with something that looked more like a fever dream. The characters were all kind of off. Like, imagine if Mickey Mouse had been made by someone who had never seen Mickey Mouse and had only heard about him secondhand. It wasn't scary in the horror sense, but it was definitely unsettling in its own right. And my job? Well, I was hired to wear a costume. No surprise there, right? But instead of something cool like a superhero, I was in this gigantic floppy dog costume. Except it didn't look like a dog. It looked like a bizarre, badly constructed fox. I didn't even get a name for my character. I was just the dog. My job was to walk around, wave at kids, try to be fun while sweating buckets in that hot, heavy suit. Not glamorous, but hey, it was a paycheck. Now the park had organized a New Year's event. It was supposed to be a big deal, longer hours, more guests, lights everywhere, music blaring from speakers, and people running around in costumes that were even weirder than usual. My shift had already been a nightmare, running around in that stupid suit, smiling like I was having the time of my life when all I wanted was to rip the head off and breathe for a minute. So when I finally managed to sneak away for a break, I took full advantage. I found the staff break room and slipped inside, shutting the door behind me. It was a small room cluttered with mismatched chairs, leftover decorations, and a few of the other costume characters sprawled out, just as exhausted as I was. I yanked off the head of my costume, letting the cool air hit my sweaty face. Finally, some relief. But then, the door opened again. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe another coworker looking for a quick break. But when I turned around, I saw him. One of the other staff members dressed in an orange cat costume that looked like it had been thrown together with scraps of fabric and mismatched fur. It didn't even look like a real cat. It looked off. Something about it just didn't sit right. He didn't say anything, just stood there staring at me through the tiny eye holes of his mask. "Hey man, you're right," I asked, trying to break the silence, but he didn't answer. He just stood there silent, motionless. I could feel the air in the room shift. There was something strange about him. Then he stepped forward. His big padded feet thudded against the floor with each step. And that's when I noticed it. He was holding something in his hands. A hammer. Not like a toy hammer either. A real full-size construction hammer. It didn't make sense. Why would someone in a costume be carrying around a hammer? I tried to laugh it off, but the tension in the room kept building. "Hey Sean, everything okay, man?" I asked again, trying to lighten the mood, but his response was chilling. He didn't say a word. Instead, his eyes narrowed through the mask, like he was sizing me up. And then the hammer, it was raised, pointed directly at me. My heart sank. Something was wrong. The way he was gripping it tight, like he was about to swing it. My instincts kicked in, and my mind started racing. Is this a joke? Is this guy just messing with me? But no, there was something darker in his stance, something menacing. You're foreign," he muttered, his voice low and rough. Why here?" I didn't understand exactly what he meant, but the hostility was clear. He was angry, furious even. Before I could process what was happening, he lunged. The hammer came swinging through the air, and without thinking, I bolted. I didn't even know where I was going. I just ran. The only thought in my head was get out. My feet pounded against the concrete floor, my chest tight with panic. I scrambled for the back door of the break room, my fingers fumbling for the handle, praying it was unlocked. I could hear his footsteps behind me, getting closer with each passing second. I barely managed to pull the door open and stumbled into another room, but I didn't get much time to breathe. I heard him charging after me, his footsteps booming against the floor. Without a second to lose, I sprinted into the crowd outside. People were everywhere, the noise was deafening, but I didn't stop. I just kept running, praying to God that I could lose him in the chaos. Somehow I made it to a supervisor, breathless and terrified, and I tried to explain what had happened. An investigation followed, but it only got weirder. It turned out that the guy in the cat costume wasn't even supposed to be there. Sean had gone home to visit his family that night, and someone had broken into the staff locker room, stolen his costume, and planned this whole thing. A hammer was reported missing from a construction worker's toolkit. This wasn't a random outburst. It was all premeditated. The police didn't take it seriously. They thought it was just some weird misunderstanding, a prank gone wrong. No one wanted to acknowledge that something actually dangerous had happened. As for me, well, I got fired. Apparently it was a violation to run through the park without my costume head on. But honestly, I was done. That place had lost all its charm, and this whole incident had left me shaken. So I quit. I didn't have the energy to stay in Korea. I packed my things, ended my relationship, and flew back to the States. The whole thing felt like a nightmare I wanted to erase from my mind. I moved on, met someone else, got married, and now I've got 2 kids. Every year without fail, they ask if we can go to Disneyland. I don't know if I'll ever go, but if I do, and I see someone in one of those giant character costumes, I'll make sure to shake their hand. Because after everything I've been through, I know those people deserve a hell of a lot more credit than anyone knows. I'd worked my fair share of odd jobs over the years, but when I got the call for a last-minute shift at a massive warehouse on the outskirts of town, I didn't hesitate. The company wasn't one I'd worked with before, but honestly, it sounded easy enough. Just your standard security work, patrol the place, check the cameras, make sure nothing's out of place. Simple. No big deal, right? But from the second I pulled up to that place, I knew something was off. It wasn't just the location. This warehouse sat like an abandoned fortress at the edge of town, surrounded by empty fields and nothingness. The kind of place you only end up at if you're really trying to avoid being found. The night was already creeping in, and the air was thick, like it hadn't moved in years. A strange quiet hung over everything, like the whole world was holding its breath. When I walked into the guard office, a tiny room tucked in the corner near the entrance, the first thing I noticed was the smell. It wasn't overpowering, just this musty industrial scent that reminded me of old metal and forgotten machines. The guy handing me my shift instructions barely looked at me, just gave me the basics. Patrol every hour. Keep an eye on the monitors. If you're not doing that, feel free to nap, read, whatever. I wasn't expecting much, so I grabbed my stuff and settled in. I even brought my laptop to pass the time. I figured it'd be a slow, uneventful night. But like I said, this wasn't just any regular night shift. By 1:00 a.m., I felt it. It started as a subtle shift in the air, like the whole building had suddenly become heavier, thicker, the kind of thick air you get when the temperature drops out of nowhere, except it wasn't cold. It was almost oppressive. I shivered despite the summer heat outside. Maybe the AC had kicked in. Maybe I grabbed an old jacket from the office and decided to start my rounds early just to shake off the strange feeling that it started to crawl under my skin. The warehouse was massive. Shelves and crates stacked as far as the eye could see. All the aisles were empty, but the buzzing of the overhead fluorescent lights filled the silence in a way that felt unnatural, almost like it was trying to drown out some deeper noise, something you couldn't quite hear, but you knew was there. I checked the security cameras. Everything seemed fine. No movement, no activity. But the deeper I walked into the warehouse, the more something didn't feel right. It wasn't a sound, wasn't a movement. It was like something was watching me. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was just tired, my mind playing tricks. But then I saw it, a flicker of movement, a shadow that didn't belong. I froze for a moment. I thought it was nothing, maybe just the angle of the light. But then I saw it again. This time it wasn't just a trick. It was real. It's a figure, thin, tall, completely still, standing in the dark, just out of reach of the light. My pulse skipped. I stood there, frozen, flashlights shaking in my hand, unsure if I was even seeing it clearly. Was it a person? I couldn't tell. The shape was wrong. Too tall. Too rigid. And there was something about the way it felt, like the air around it had changed, like it was absorbing everything in its vicinity, pulling the space around it closer. I wanted to run. I knew I should run, but my feet wouldn't move. My heart raced, but I couldn't get myself to leave. I stared at the figure, and it stared back. My flashlight flickered, dimming for just a moment before the beam steadied. That's when the figure moved, but not like a person. It was fluid, unnatural. It twisted, stretched, like the shadows themselves were alive, pulling at the walls and the air around it. Everything around us seemed to shrink. There was no room for anything else, just me and that thing, suspended in the thick, suffocating silence. I don't know how long I stood there. Time felt like it had stopped, like nothing existed except that moment. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure melted back into the darkness, disappearing into the shadows like it had never been there. I didn't think. I didn't stop to process it. I just ran. I don't know how I made it back to the break room. I was shaking my heart in my throat, but somehow I locked myself inside and collapsed into the chair. 3:00 a.m., 3 hours of my shift left. I was supposed to do rounds every hour, but there was no way in hell I was going back out there. Not after what I'd just seen. I put my headphones in, watched a few movies on my laptop to distract myself from the chaos in my head. It didn't help. The whole time I felt like I wasn't alone, even in the break room. I couldn't stop hearing the soft, eerie hum of the warehouse. Like something was still moving just out of sight, waiting for the right moment. When morning finally came, I felt a wave of relief so intense I almost broke down. I made it. I hadn't gone back out there once. I didn't care what happened next. I just wanted to leave. But when I went to clock out, no one said a word. No questions. No complaints. Just a quiet, "See you next time." And that was it. I figured maybe I was just shaken up. I mean, who wouldn't be after something like that? But the strangest part? No one else had seen anything. No one else had felt anything. I asked around the office the next day. Had anyone else worked the night shift there? Had anyone else experienced anything strange? Every response was the same. "Nah, you're just jumpy. It's fine. It's fine." But something in the air, something about the whole situation didn't sit right with me. It felt like they knew more than they were letting on. And me, I never went back. The job wasn't worth it. Not when it felt like the warehouse was hiding something, something that didn't belong in the world. Every now and then, I still think about that night. The way the shadows move, the chill in the air. I'll hear a creak or the faintest shift in the silence, and I wonder, did I really escape, or is it still out there, waiting for me to come back? Never been a fan of the late shift, especially at the old hotel. The place had this weird energy that made everything feel off kilter once the sun went down. The lobby, with its peeling wallpaper and dusty furniture, always seemed to grow quieter at night. It felt like the shadows were creeping in, waiting for something to happen. And there I was, sitting behind a reception desk, trying to stay awake. My eyes were heavy from lack of sleep, my fingers hitting keys on the keyboard almost automatically as I entered reports I barely cared about. It was one of those nights where the silence was so thick you could almost feel it pressing in. And then out of nowhere I felt a soft tap on my shoulder. I spun around, heart racing, expecting to see someone standing there, but nothing. Just the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, brushing off the feeling. Probably just fatigue messing with my head. I hadn't gotten a solid night's sleep in weeks, so it wasn't surprising that my brain was playing tricks on me. But then it happened again. A light tug at the back of my hair. My hands shot up instinctively to feel the spot, but nothing was there. I turned around. Empty. Just the same old lobby, still and unmoving. But my skin prickled with unease. Something wasn't right. I told myself it was nothing. It had to be. Nerves. Maybe it was just the weird air that hung around late at night. But then a loud thud snapped me out of my thoughts. A book one hadn't even touched, sitting perfectly still on the edge of the desk, had toppled to the floor. My heart skipped. I froze. No one was around. The book hadn't moved on its own. I was sure of it. Trying to shake it off, I stood up and headed to the break room. A cup of coffee, I thought. Something to distract me. But the second I walked in, I felt it again, like I was being watched. It wasn't paranoia, it was real. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I quickly glanced around. The corners of the room were dark, empty. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there waiting. I grabbed my coffee, trying to ground myself. The smell of it should have been comforting, but it barely registered. The buzz in my chest was getting worse. It was just after 3:30 a.m. When I finally went back to my desk, clutching my coffee cup like it was some kind of lifeline, I glanced at the security cameras on my screen. But then, out of nowhere, I heard it. Ding dong. The doorbell rang. I froze, my heart thudding in my chest. I glanced at the door. Through the glass I saw my own reflection, nothing out of the ordinary. No one. I stared at it for a moment longer, my skin crawling, before I stepped up and hesitantly opened the door. The air outside was cold, the parking lot dark and still. No sign of anyone. I shut the door quickly, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach, and returned to my desk. Just as I sat down, the phone rang, jarring me from my thoughts. It was my manager asking me to clean the pool area. My stomach churned at the thought, but I agreed. I grabbed the cleaning supplies, trying to distract myself. The silence in the halls was suffocating. My footsteps echoed off the walls as I made my way toward the pool. When I reached the door, I paused. There on the floor were faint wet footprints, but the pool had been empty earlier. I was sure of it. I shook my head, trying to brush off the unease. It's fine, Jen. You're just tired. But the sensation of something being off didn't go away. I bent down to scoop some leaves out of the water when the chill hit me. Hard. It wasn't just the cold of the air, it was something else. Something deeper. Suddenly I felt it. Something grabbed my ankle. My body jerked as if yanked by invisible hands, and I lost my balance, crashing into the cold water. Panic hit me like a freight train. I gasped, choking on the water as I fought to stay above the surface. My body felt heavy, like I was sinking, drowning. But there was something more, something pulling at me. I managed to scramble out of the pool, hands clawing at the edge. My head was spinning, but my mind was locked on the image of her. A woman. She stood by the edge of the pool, her skin gray and skeletal, her eyes hollow. Her lips moved, but her words were so soft, so cold, they were almost inaudible. I hate you all. Her voice scraped against my ears like nails on a chalkboard. Before I could react, she was gone, vanishing into the air with nothing but the echo of her words. My legs shook as I stumbled toward the reception desk, heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't explain it to my manager. I told him what happened, but all he did was glance at the security footage and shrug. You probably just slipped, Jen. No one's been in the pool, but I knew what I'd felt. The chill, the tug on my ankle. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't my imagination. Something had happened, something real. I wasn't crazy for feeling it. I sat back at the desk, trying to focus on the lobby in front of me, but my mind was still reeling. Then, just when I thought I could calm down, the doorbell rang again. I stared at the door. It creaked open on its own like someone or something was beckoning me. My legs felt like lead, and I was frozen to the spot. Then, just before I could move, something flickered in my peripheral vision, a dark shape standing just beyond the threshold. I didn't wait. I grabbed my things, ran out into the cold night air, and didn't stop until I was in my car, speeding away from the hotel. My mind kept replaying the ghost's eyes, her whisper, her touch, but I knew I'd have to go back. The hotel wasn't done with me. The next day I walked back into the lobby. The silence hung thick again, just like before. My hands were shaking as I worked, trying to push past the memory of what had happened. As I walked toward the pool, my feet dragged. The lights flickered above, casting strange shadows. I half expected her to appear, but it was still empty, silent. That's when I saw it. A door tucked behind a curtain, a room I'd never noticed before. My curiosity got the best of me, and I went in. In the corner, I found a pile of old newspapers. One article caught my eye. Mysterious murder at the hotel, night staff member missing. I read the article slowly, my heart thudding. The story described the murder of a woman, another night staff member, almost a year ago. She'd been killed during a blackout by a fellow employee. Her body had been found the next day, a flower pinned to her dress. But the killer had vanished, and no one had ever found him. I felt my blood run cold. This was her, the ghost. It all made sense. She wasn't haunting me. She was trying to tell me something. I went back to the pool, my body tense, my heart racing. There by the edge she was again, her face twisted into a grin, and before I could do anything she yanked me back into the water. I fought like hell to get out. This time I wasn't going to let her drag me under. But as I broke the surface, gasping for air, something inside me shifted. I knew what I had to do. I went straight to the security footage and dug through old tapes. Most of it was corrupted, but one image stood out. A man entering the back door the night of the murder, his shoes caked with mud. The next day I went behind the hotel and dug through debris until I found it. An old box buried under some branches. Inside was a knife and a USB drive. I turned everything over to the police. They arrested the man, and the case was finally closed. That night I went back to the hotel one last time. The ghost appeared again, but this time her face was soft, almost peaceful. She gave me one last look, her eyes filled with gratitude before she disappeared into the dark. I left the hotel, knowing that it had no more secrets and that she finally could rest. The nightmare was over. The hotel was done with me.